This history will hopefully inspire us to fight racism today because of our faith. This work includes a documentary film and a church curriculum. And I want to thank you for coming tonight to learn about the relevance of history and Christian faith to our current efforts to recognize the intrinsic worth of individuals and for multicultural reconciliation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Christopher Momany.
Travel, isn't it? You're all spread out. I'm a local church pastor, so you know I'm tempted to say, come, but I won't do that. I'll respect where you are. I want to thank Dean Fetters and where'd Ms. Keller go now? Oh, he went over there, okay. Yeah, I got to meet Kim and Dr. Drury, Dr. Webb, and many others have welcomed me. This is a beautiful place. I'm a pretty energetic speaker, so I hope that's not a bad thing. If I am, I'm not trying to be, rhetorically wild or anything. I just get excited about what I speak to. I'm going to show you some slides. I'm not going to read PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm involved in this story and ask you to do some soul searching on your own, okay? And my heart is always with students. So faculty, colleagues, I'm not trying to not speak with you, but students, I want to engage you, okay? So I want to have a good dialogue and conversation with you. I work at a food pantry in Dowagiac, Michigan. It's a small town where I am a pastor now. And there's a fellow there. He's a wonderful guy, but he's very serious. And this is a serious time for Christian people in our world. But I once said to him, I said, Jeff, he's one of the Jeffs, I suppose. I was talking to the dean. I said, Jeff, there is no more exciting enterprise today than being a disciple of Jesus Christ. Huh? He's, I don't know. Exciting, Chris? I said, yes, exciting. No, meaningful. Meaningful, okay, yes, purposeful. Exciting? I said, exciting! So it's okay to be excited about your faith and your practice. It doesn't mean you're not going to go through some difficult things, see some difficult things, and need to address difficult things. But there's an excitement, and you'll see that in me, okay? So I want to pick up where Ms. Keller left off and tell you a story. This is a story about a document in an archives. Now, you have to be a special kind of nerd. Not Ms. Keller, me, okay. You have to be a special kind of nerd to get all excited about this kind of stuff. But it's a discovery story, okay? It is wonderful. As it turns out, it's a discovery story that has a sharp edge, that challenged me and some other people, and I'm going to leave you with a bit of a challenge. It was late October. It was on a Friday afternoon, 2015, and I was in the chaplain's office at Adrian College. Things had quieted down, and I'm sifting through papers, I have to write reports and this sort of thing. And so I'm doing that stuff, and the phone rang, and it was Ms. Keller. And she said, Chris, do you have a minute? I said, sure. She's over at the library, about a block away. So I went over to the library, and she pulled up a box. Now, in libraries, you have these very formal kind of archival boxes. Do you know those? You've been in the library, right? Come on now. I'm just kidding. I don't mean to insult you. But they're called Hollinger boxes. They're very... This was not one of those. This was, gosh, it could have been a box from Grandma's turkey dinner or something. It was a very ordinary kind of beat-up box. Someone had brought this over to Ms. Keller from the alumni office at that college, and it had all this miscellaneous stuff in there. Had some yearbooks. It's a small college, I think probably not unlike Huntington as far as enrollment. And they had yearbooks. It had photographs, black and white, headshots of college presidents, and all of this stuff. It had one of those freshman beanies. Do you know what a freshman beanie is? They used to make anybody here first-year student? You guys. They would make you, I think, wear this strange-looking hat around, and I don't know the purpose of that. They had one of those, right? And then at the very bottom, I think it was at the bottom, was this old book. Old book, and it was this book. Now, it didn't have a name on it, right? And it didn't have any identifier on it. But this is an old book, and that's called marbling, that publishers used to do with all kinds of dangerous chemicals and dyes and things back in the day. And the inside, the date that was listed in the first sort of entry in this book was from 1839. Now, it's weird when you find something from 1839 at a college that was founded in 1859. You get me? So this is some kind of prequel document. It got there somehow from an earlier period somewhere else, and we weren't sure. So Ms. Keller said, look at this. What do you think? And I think she wanted to know if I thought it was written by another Christian leader from that college, a man named Asa Mahan, M-A-H-A-N. I said, it's not his, and it's got me flummoxed, right? I'm really, what the heck? So this is the book. It's going to get more interesting as we go. So there we have some of the writing. So that clarifies things, right? Oh, boy. And I'll tell you about this in a sec. And so I convinced her to let me take it home. Now, this is like breaking all the rules of professional archival work. But it wasn't in the collection yet officially. So I figured, I'll be careful. I drink coffee, I must admit. I would not drink coffee in possession. Don't want to spill stuff. And no pens. You don't take pens into the archives, right? Only pencils. Repeat after me. No pens. Only pencils. All right, so if you're going to do historical work, you're all prepped. But I did take it home, and the next day was Saturday morning, and I started to open it very carefully on my desk at home. It was about a 100-page document. It looked like some kind of journal because there were dates, and the person said things like, I traveled up the mountain to visit the people at the such and such church today, and I did 3 baptisms. So this kind of stuff. I'm thinking, okay, so maybe it's a pastor, a missionary from the old days, 1839, before the Civil War, right? Then I got to the 24th page, and that's what I saw. Okay. And as you probably know by now from some of the things that have been said, that is a drawing of, students, help me out, a boat. What kind of boat? A fast boat? Oh, a bass boat. No, not quite. I thought you said a fast boat. It was fast, but it got run down by the British Navy in a chase, so it wasn't quite fast enough. This is a slave ship, folks. And it took me a second for that to register. And my heart sank to my feet. So what this is a diagram of a ship in Jamaica, in Port Royal, which is near Kingston, Jamaica. And it is a ship named the Ulysses that was flying under a Portuguese flag that had been impounded. In other words, the British Navy ran it down, so to speak, in a sea chase and took it into custody, much like they would with a smuggling operation today, navies and so forth off the coast. They took it to Montego Bay, Jamaica, and they let the people go because slavery had been outlawed by this time in Jamaica. All right? Well, that was in November of 1839. The day the writer of this document stepped on that ship was December 25th, 1839. This guy went down on Christmas Day, stepped aboard this ship that had recently been used to, abduct, capture, imprison people in slavery. And you see the writing inside there. Those are dimensions, the space, how much space, in 4 compartments for boys, girls, men, women. And as Ms. Keller mentioned, total of 556 people in human conditions, crammed together. So as I transcribed, where you take the handwriting and you decipher it, it was a very moving experience and a painful thing to read. And the writer says, where are the Christians when this stuff is going on? Where are the Christians? He says, it seems as if the church were asleep. The church isn't doing anything about this. Slavery was still legal in the United States. So I read some more of this journal, and by comparing names and dates and things, we identified the writer as a man named David Ingram. And this fellow, David Ingram, was, at this point, about 28 years old. He had gone to college in Cincinnati, and then he had gone to Oberlin College in Ohio. That's up near Cleveland. And Oberlin, at that time, was a very, very dedicated Christian college with revival fires breaking out. And they also had a great social conscience at Oberlin. And the president at Oberlin was a man named Asa Mahan, who later became the president at Adrian College, where we found this. So we think that old Doc Mahan, as they called him, when he came to Michigan, he brought this from Oberlin. So how did it get back into his hands if this 28-year-old guy wrote all this down? This fellow, David Ingram, and his wife, Betsy, labored, and both of them had tuberculosis. And David died when he was 30 years old. And his wife, or his widow, if you will, died not too many years later. The conditions people endured to share the message of Christ. And this is the page 24 that started a whole story. Now, what we did, I hit the wrong button, Sam. Of course, you can't read that, but I wanted you to at least see it. You see how that up in the upper left, it kind of looks like that diagram? This fellow, David Ingram, took his journal and filled out the details in a newspaper article. He interviewed officers from the British Navy. He interviewed other people, and this was published where he talks about the horror of all this. This was in January of 1840, so roughly a month after he stepped on the ship. This has been out there in these old abolitionist newspapers, admittedly hard to find and in archives, but until Noel found the actual notes, the original notes, nobody knew about this stuff. Okay? So those of us who had discovered this, primarily Ms. Keller first, and then I got in on that, we knew we had to do something. This is Asa Mahan, they called him the old doctor. Students loved this guy. Students loved this guy. Faculty, not always. Trustees, even less. But he was loved by students. And he believed a lot of things, but as a Christian, he had a theological orientation. And his theological orientation, I'm going to summarize all too briefly. Two things. Number one, people are created in the image of God, right? You read it in Genesis. You say, what about sin? I mean, there's the fall, of course. But the fall is a corruption, as an expression, and a part of our sin, of course. But that doesn't mean people aren't uniquely valuable. He had what I would call a theology of value. In fancy language, we would say it's a kind of axiological theology. That means of value, human value. This is a creation-oriented ethic. And yet, as a Christian, he also believed in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that Jesus came, fully God, fully human. He's a pretty orthodox Christian guy. And that Jesus died on a cross for each and every person. And that Jesus rose from the dead. So this fellow believed that Christ's sacrifice... Am I wandering too much? Am I giving you fits? I'm sorry. Okay. This fellow believed that Christ's sacrifice was for each and every human being. So you take that and you say, really, his perspective was that people are doubly sacred. You with me? There's a creation-created aspect of human dignity, sinners though we be, and there's a redemptive, Christocentric, Christ-centered value to human beings. I'll come back to that a little bit later. He was the teacher of the fellow in Jamaica. Okay? Well, I had to put that one in. 3 years ago, Noel and I went back to Adrian College for just a morning, I guess. We met there for a few hours, and we did some documentation with this journal. So I wasn't sure how you would be involved tonight, so I wanted to make sure that you were involved here. So you're on the big screen. This is me with my shiny head, and my friend on the left is a prestigious church historian, Dr. Doug Strong from Seattle Pacific University, who is all geeked up about this. And, you will know one of us is wearing gloves, so I'm still on the wrong side of policy there a little bit. Hey, I'm doing better. I have gloves. And what we did is we started an organization of scholars, Christian scholars from around America. And we call ourselves the Dialogue on Race and Faith. Because we were Christian scholars, are Christian scholars. We don't hide that. But we're dealing with racial justice. And particularly since 2020, it's been, I know this is a much older problem, but it's been in the consciousness of many Americans. And so this is from the summer of 2021. And there were 11 or 12 of us there, about equally African American and white Anglo people, and at that time one Korean American scholar, Dr. Chung Kim, all Christian scholars from around the country, Baltimore, Chicago, Seattle, other parts of California, Idaho. So here's where I am so glad you shared the laser pointer with me. In that journal, we discovered, and in follow-up readings of these articles, that many of the people forced on that ship came from an area of West Africa that today is known as the country Benin. I don't know. I know Benin is a small country, so even if you're familiar with Africa, it might not be that familiar to you. So does anybody know where that is? And have you been there? It would be rare, I think, probably. But Benin is right down here. Pardon my shaky hand. It's near where Nigeria is today. And in Benin, there is a terrible, terrible place. It's not terrible today, but it's become a memorial sort of site. But a site on a beach called Ouida, where 1 million people from Africa were enslaved and forced onto ships. Now, they were not the entirety of people forced into slavery from Africa, but this was one of the central points. And many of the people on that ship, the Ulysses, came from this place, Ouida, in what is today Benin. Some of them came from regions kind of further up the coast here, but mostly down here in what is today Benin. I want to show you here in a sec what that's like. So here's West Africa, 1839. And instead of the term Benin, you see this word Dahomey, which was the kingdom in what is now Benin. Okay? Nigeria's over here. This is the gathering point in Ouida, Benin, where many of the enslaved people were driven together from out in other parts of the country. It's a country that's very thin, I guess I would say, in north and south. And people were gathered here, and we're talking about a situation where human beings are bought and sold as cargo, folks. All right? They gathered there, and then they were forced to march or walk about 2.5 miles, in terms of miles, 2.5 miles toward the coast. This is the beach at Ouida, and I'm going to ask us just to see this slide for about 15 seconds in silence, okay? Looks like a beautiful beach today, doesn't it? It's a place where a lot of horrible things happen, where ships, primarily from European powers, Portugal, Spain, France got involved later in the colonialism of this area. At one point, British ships, where ships were offshore and people were forced into canoes and taken out to the ships. And this one ship, the Ulysses, had 556 people. I have papers that are sort of an enlarged page of that ship diagram with the transcription and the numbers. If anyone wants to see those numbers, it'll break your heart. I'll have them after the talk tonight, okay? So what do you do when you know about this? You start an organization, you try to do things that'll build better understanding, you don't shy away from the injustice, and we went to Benin. We didn't go to Benin as Christian tourists. We didn't go to Benin as a kind of Western colonial force pretending to do, noble things. We went to Benin under the invitation of many people there who found out about our project. And I want to be very clear here. The dress that we are wearing, we had no idea we'd be receiving by our hosts in Benin. You know what cultural appropriation is? When people think, oh, gee, that's cool, somebody's culture, and I'm going to wear something that's, a part of that culture. I'm very concerned about that. This was not that. We were offered these by people in Benin and honored, to receive them. And the best thing really about that is this gentleman here on the left, my friend, Dr. Sibingyang Nahusu is in our group. He was born in Benin. And Dr. Nahusu, who is a teacher at Seattle Pacific University, wonderful Christian guy, took us to his home, where his father is still living over 100 years old. And he is just a marvelous person, and the rest of us are there learning. Benin is a place where French is the dominant language. They asked me to give the address. My French is very poor, but I tried, and I think people appreciated that when I said in French, we have come here to learn. We have come here to learn. And we had a great conversation with some of the university people and people from churches. This is Sibingyang leading a worship service. In Benin, there is a celebration of the life that comes through Jesus Christ like you can hardly imagine. Okay? Now it was a 3-hour celebration, and it seemed like 20 minutes. And he was leading us, our friend Sibingyang, Pastor Nahusu, Dr. Nahusu, he's a many-gifted guy. And this is just a shot of me with one of the university students. I learned how to appreciate Google Translate, when you're trying to text, because he was being very patient with me, but I could tell I was not the best communicator in French. Wonderful guy. And there we are talking about what we're going to do when we get back to the United States. Well, we wrote a book. Now, professors write books, so that may sound like a knee-jerk reaction, right? Professor, I did this. What are you going to do? I'll write a book. I did that. What are you going to do? Write a book. Well, we did write a book. It's a collaborative that takes the story of this journal, but it also has 2 other people who are critically important here. One, a man named James Bradley, who was enslaved in America, who is a friend of David Ingram, brilliant guy, James Bradley, and a woman named Nancy Prince, who is from the Boston area, African-American woman, whose family really has revolutionary American heritage around the Bunker Hill area. Had a wonderful testimony of her own, claim to be an American, just like everyone else. They were colleagues that took a terrible situation in the time of slavery and tried to model a better way. And so this book moves from this horror toward looking at ways in which Christians can pick up on their hope. You with me? It's not all terrible stories, but it is an honest exploration of slavery that moves toward what Christian people can do to make things better. You're not going to hear me give a lot of prescriptions tonight. So to say, what can we do? You're going to have to do some work. There's a lot of how-to books out there on the legacy of racism. And they're good, or what to do. I'm going to do something very countercultural and not offer a lot of how-tos, because I want you to be convicted and do your own work, okay? And do some reading. I'll be your friend. You can talk to me anytime you want. One of the things that we've done is we've gone to places large and small, and we've shown a film. We have a very powerful 30-minute film that I did not bring with me tonight, but I've got a link for anybody who wants to view it, that picks up this story and moves it into 2024, if you will. This is in my hometown library in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Anybody know where Benton Harbor, Michigan is? It's on Lake Michigan, yeah. It's a place that has suffered mightily in terms of inequities around race. It is next to a town divided by a river, and the town across the way is exceedingly privileged. And Benton Harbor, Michigan, my hometown, is a sort of Rust Belt community that has been isolated, where there has been just terrible economic deprivation, and much of it driven by racism. The local library wanted to host a discussion group, so I threw that in there as my homage to the Benton Harbor Public Library, where I learned how to read. All right? And here we are outside. You say, why is this guy showing us things from this little library? It makes a difference. And then we had a film screening in Oberlin, Ohio, the place where a lot of this movement started in the 1830s. This is the Apollo Theater in Oberlin, Ohio, not in New York City. We had people lined up around the block to watch this film. I'd be happy to share it with Huntington University if you're ever interested. And this is the last slide that I'll share. Oberlin High School. This is not in Oberlin, Ohio. Do you know where this is? Jamaica. This is the legacy of the missionaries. This is the legacy of the fellow David Ingram and Nancy Prince, the woman who was a missionary there. This is in Jamaica today as one of the legacies of Christian education. It's a K through 12 kind of school, okay? So I want to close by doing something I don't know if it's done very often in your, I keep wanting to call this a convocation, but it's sort of a convocation, I guess. It's a lecture talk. And I apologize I wander. I want to tell you my salvation story. All right? You can go places where a speaker will share some hard-hitting things on racism in America, right? And if you haven't, you need to do that. You can go somewhere where a speaker will talk about salvation and grace and Christian discipleship, and maybe even share their testimony. And that's important. You rarely hear the two at the same program, right? Well, you're going to hear it tonight, because it has to do with why I'm doing this work, and I'll let you think about it. I'm an older person, all right? I'll share dates, why not? You can laugh at me as an old person. In April of 1977, I was 15 years old, part of a Christian church in Michigan, had a good church grounding, but I was very confused about life. I know that it's not only 15-year-olds that are confused about life. Sometimes it's when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Sometimes it's when you're 65, I suppose. I don't know. One of the things that I was most confused about is my own value. All right? I was then living on the posh side of the river in my hometown area, where everything was measured by money, wealth, social reputation, and scores on standardized tests. Right? And the National Honor Society, and who got in before the other people got in. I know that doesn't happen anymore, right? And it seemed like every parent in the world was very concerned about their son or daughter getting into a selective college. And those who, and please, professors, don't take offense at this. I mean, I'm not picking on good pedagogy, but I was not considered good enough. Okay? I was an also-ran. I was a jock, but I was never going to be all state. I'd get B's and B minuses and C's, right? While others were punching out the PSAT exams and the scores. And I went to college that way too, later on. But out of my salvation experience, I started to learn my own value, and it took some years, but eventually I learned that I was a pretty good student. But when I was 15 years old, I went to an outdoor music festival called the Ichthus Festival in Wilmore, Kentucky. I'm naming that because some of the old timers, yeah, I remember Ichthus. No? Does anybody know that? Young people, this was out on a hillside, and you would get all of these Christian bands of the era, right? The music has changed so much over the years. But I'm telling you, you haven't had a Christian experience till you went outside on a hillside in mud in a thunderstorm and, slip slide with an old poncho and use the porta potties, and all the rest of that stuff. It was actually a Christian response to Woodstock from 1969, to have a Christian movement that would gather young people. And I was young once. I really was. But I was very insecure. And on Friday evening of that week, I can tell you the time, the date, everything. I don't say that because I think you all should have that. God meets us in different ways. Mine was 7:30. Well, I went down at 7 and accepted Jesus. I'm not going to do that. But I remember that as a very concrete experience for me. And an invitation was given, and I went forward. And I remember that we were outside, of course, on this hillside, and at the bottom was a thing we called the tabernacle. It's like an open-air chapel, half barn, half, picnic shelter kind of thing. And it was a misty night, and I went in there, and they had, people from the seminary in that town, Asbury Theological Seminary, people there to pray with you, right? Have you ever done that? Have you gone to, and you've had a heart-to-heart talk with Jesus, and somebody prays with you? And I remember this fellow who didn't have anybody near him, so I said, I'll go talk to this guy. I think he's supposed to pray with me, And he gave me his name, and he asked me my name. I said, I'm Chris. This guy was a big burly dude who had this big bushy beard, and he was ancient. I mean, he was an old guy. He was at least 30, right? And he said, how could I pray with you? So we talked. And he said, Chris, I want you to know something. I said, okay. He said, I'm glad you're here tonight. And I want you to know, if you were the only human being on earth, a lot of you have heard this, right? If you were the only human being on the face of the planet, Jesus Christ would have gone to the cross for you. I wanted to say, man, I can't get in the National Honor Society. I messed up that last exam. It doesn't matter. If you were the only person on the face of the earth. That's real for me, and it's real for me today. The last Adrian College trustee meeting, they asked me to give the devotion, and I told them this story. You should have seen the looks around the table, but it was a good experience. You say, why do you tell us that? I'm telling you that because this fellow Asa Mahan, when he talked about slavery, he often used a phrase. And the phrase was, those for whom Christ died. Get me? In my tradition, we can have theological conversation. In my tradition, Jesus Christ died for each and every human being on earth. Why? Why does a Christian church tolerate anyone being treated in such dehumanizing ways when God climbed down into the world and has that kind of particular, personal, and expansive love? You with me? And I think this all goes for you. So there should be no division between the personal intensity of our reception of Jesus Christ and our living out discipleship and our concern for social structures and social justice. I'm going to let it sit there so we can talk a little bit. Am I okay there, Dr. Drury? I might be a little later than I should, but let's do that at the very end. If you don't mind, I know there's an important political conversation in our country tonight, and I'm mindful of that. I'm not trying to joke about it, but I'll honor time. Yeah. Anybody have a question?
Do you remember a moment when you had that second awakening? Like your first awakening was when you met Jesus. The second awakening being like you realized that your Christian faith had to matter in terms of these racial justice issues. And if you could kind of talk about that, that'd be great.
I appreciate that. It's a very good question. I think it's been a little bit non-linear for me because growing up in Benton Harbor, one of my best educators, one of my best teachers was a fourth grade teacher named Geneva Isom. So even as I was sort of in that very young, undeveloped stage of Christianity, I was in a school where I was a white child, maybe one of 9 white children in a 35-member class. It was almost all of the other children were African American. And I had a very good and affirming experience there. So I think later, as I developed this sort of spiritual awareness, I don't know, at some point it connected where I said, oh, I didn't understand how these things are related, but all of that sort of impetus toward human dignity, I guess I would say, is very real. I don't know if that answers your question. It wasn't a real unique, or a real linear, rather. The good part of the story is I'm a friend with Mrs. Isom today. This was in 1971. She was my teacher. She was like fresh out of college, had been involved in CORE, Congress on Racial Equality from Arkansas, African-American woman, first womanist theologian I ever met, if you know what that is. And I hadn't talked to her for decades. And then when we got into this book and this project, I looked her up in Atlanta. In fact, I should call her tomorrow. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah, it made sense of what had been bubbling up inside as a kid. So. Anybody else? Come on. No bad questions, no bad thoughts.
So the project has taken about 10 years to come this far.
Yeah.
What are some of the what next for this?
Well, that last slide from Jamaica was a little bit of a hint. We're probably going to go there and try to see if we can find descendants from the Ulysses, which is a tough thing, but we do have some evidence of where the people settled. And I don't want to say this is a story of rosy endings, because even though the British government had outlawed slavery and was, in control of Jamaica, people were still treated terribly, people who had been enslaved. And so many of the people who were released from the ship, many of the men were forced into the sort of colonial British military service, and other people. And many were forced to work on plantations for very few cents, per day. In effect, right? I don't know if it's slavery or very close to that. So we want to do that, and we do have some I have a friend in Jamaica, and I've also found in this whole project that as much as it's a big social issue, I want to be accountable to my personal relationships and personal integrity, and so I need to thank some people in Jamaica. I don't know if that helps at all. There's so much more work to do. Come on, students, there you go.
I'd just like to first of all say I admire the way that you were a discerner of the word by doing what you felt like you were called to do. I was just wondering, when you went to Africa, did you get a chance to minister to other people there, and how was that, if so?
To minister to, or?
Share the good news, or?
Well, yeah, certainly. Although, and I think one of the things I'm learning, a lot of us are learning, is, there's going to be those of you in missiology know this in a much more sophisticated way than I do, but there's a way in which many Christians from Africa are the ones doing the mission work among us and in our hearts. So, yeah, certainly, the African countries around Benin have a variety of religious traditions. But, man, there's a lot of power there to teach us, I guess, to tell you the truth. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Let's suppose that a man is 6 feet tall and 2 feet wide. That's about 12 square feet. What are the dimensions of the men's compartment on that ship, and how many men were in there, roughly?
Oh, boy. I'm trying to go by memory now. Does anyone here have the sheet I handed out at dinner? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Thank you. Can you read the dimensions on the side and I'll repeat them over the mic.
The men's room?
Yes.
It says 32 by 18 and 216.
So 32 feet by 18 feet. Now, here's the real terrible, I mean, it's all terrible. It was only about 2.5 feet tall, the compartment. How many men again? 216 men crammed into that inhuman space. I don't want to, deal in salacious, splashy stuff, but there were accounts that human excrement and filth were ankle deep, because the people had nowhere to go. Yeah. Did you have your hand up? Okay, I don't want to miss you. Yes, sir.
Along with this journal, have there been other abolitionist texts that have really grabbed your attention and spoken to you over the years, or even other anti-racist texts in more recent years that you feel like would be valuable for us to engage along with?
Yeah, I'm going to put in a plug for a friend of mine here. Now, there are a lot of narratives, of course, right? That some have been there's the story of the ship in Mobile Bay, the Clotilda. Have you seen any of that? One of the very later ships to come to the U.S., and they've discovered its remnants and in the community. It's a good story in that it challenges us that this is not only a historical thing that's going on today. So in Mobile, Alabama area right now, even as we speak, they're trying to deal with the legacy. What do we do? Who owns that ship that was burned to the waterline and all of that? So anything on the Clotilda, which is more of a story, I think it was, oh gosh. The name escapes me, but there's been some stuff done on that. And then today, I want to shout out one of my friends, Jamar Tisby. Have any of you heard of Reverend Dr. Jamar Tisby? He's done a lot on anti-racism, and to be honest, he's got a lot of pushback from Christian communities. And I know Jamar, he's in our group, and he's a friend of mine, and I know his heart. And he just came out with a book called The Spirit of Justice. So I would recommend that. I mean, it came out like September 4th or something like that. I remember the day it came out. But anything by Dr. Tisby. That doesn't mean I have the exact same convictions he has, or that we don't look at things from slightly different angles. But I know him to be a credible witness, and he has had some pushback and some accusations made that I don't think are very fair. Yeah. So students now, take it to heart. Take it to heart. It's a lot of work to do. And there's no more exciting life than living as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Seriously. Anyway, so thanks.
do
Yeah,
something.
and I know I'm getting up to the hour,
And we're going to get you out of here very quickly.
but I need to do one more thing. I need you to bear with me for 3 or 4 minutes. Noel, will you come up again? This is very important. I was hinting at it when I said that this project is social and big picture, but it's also personal, that part of justice is being respectful of one another, caring for one another, respecting contributions, okay? And I have something for Ms. Keller, so if you can stay with me for 4 more minutes, we will try to do the right thing. Now, I know, I didn't tell you, so
Am I supposed to open this?
yeah. And I'll read it to folks so they know what you're getting, if you don't mind. It's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing. I'll take this. My delicate wrapping job. Okay. Can you see it? I'll read it. Is that okay?
Yep.
This is a framed document. It's a proclamation. Have you ever gone to a meeting where the mayor has shown up and said, the city of Huntington, Indiana wishes to share this proclamation, whereas, why for, right? You need to help me do this because this is to Ms. Keller, and I'll tell you when to help. Proclamation by the Dialogue on Race and Faith. Whereas, the Dialogue on Race and Faith is a cooperative venture given impetus through the discovery of the abolitionist Journal of David Stedman Ingram in October 2015. And, come on. Whereas Noel Keller served as the Adrian College archivist in October of 2015 and received a box of miscellaneous artifacts, including the Journal of David Stedman Ingram, and, whereas. Come on, you say, he's not going to make me say whereas. Come on. Whereas. Thank you. Now, therefore, whereas Ms. Keller recognized the historical significance of the Ingram Journal and initiated the research that has led to the Dialogue on Race and Faith, now, therefore, we members of the Dialogue on Race and Faith do hereby express our deepest appreciation for Noel Keller and her ministry of communal memory and her stewardship of Christian history. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our signatures this 26th day of April, 2024. And there are about 15 signatures in a formal, way, signed by the Dialogue on Race and Faith. So this is to you. I didn't mean to make light of it with the whereases, but it may seem really formal, but it's meant as a personal expression of faith. Yep. I'm good. You okay? So you can visit with her and take a look at the document, if she wants you to. It's her document now, but yeah. Yeah, I'll be at the library, okay. So, Dr. Drury, where am I going here? Out to the table. Okay, folks, I have the book. It's $20. I don't make really money on this, but I buy books and then get some of my expense back, right? You're welcome to it. I'd be happy to sign it, but I'm not trying to bend your arm. But if you got a minute, see me at the table. I'll answer any more questions.